you're around, round, round. When you're around, round, round.
I can't get back on my feet. I fall right into you. In the end, angel cries, oh, I awake your ruse. And all of my senses, my heart screams the truth. And I can't help it, I walk straight to you.
Hello and welcome everybody to Overcast, the United Rogue Overwatch podcast. I am, of course, your host, Datsupkan. Joining with today, I have Andrew, as always. But tonight, we also have a very special guest. Joining us, we have the legendary Adbon. How are you both doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. Having a good time waiting for playoffs. Hopefully that goes well. Maybe we'll actually be able to get a game scheduled for once. That would be nice.
Yes.
The amount of
Schedulings.
unscheduled games just casually, hanging out in the schedule right now is insane.
So it's
Yeah.
definitely something. Just sitting here hoping, maybe we'll see some Overwatch actually being played, but don't get my hopes up.
Listen, we'll talk about it a little bit more, but this week was week 6, and I think one week 6 game got fully played out. So we're trying to figure it out, I guess, in the entirety of United Rogue. But with some of those games, I think we got to go into the Emerald, not week 6 game, but instead the Emerald week 5 game of Atlanta versus Washington, which honestly ended up being kind of entertaining to watch. It was a nice 3-0 in favor of Atlanta, giving them a very much needed win as New Orleans starts to creep closer and closer towards an upswing. But throughout that game, honestly, I don't know about you, but I was kind of just watching, thinking the entire time, all right, well, we haven't seen Washington a whole lot. Atlanta's been hanging out, kind of been on a decline, but I think they still get this. And all of a sudden, Washington comes out and gets one, maybe 2 good team fights, and I'm starting to kind of crap myself a little bit and go, hold on, this might be a game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting seeing how Washington has all of their wins are from forfeits, and they've played 8 maps, they've won
Yeah.
2 of them, and this other team, Atlanta, 3-3, pretty solidly the second place team in their conference, taking them to a map 5 when there's literally seen nothing from them. Granted, the only other game that they played before this was against Ottawa, so it's hard to expect to see too much from that. But it is weird, at least, to see this go to a map 5 from just the pure gameplay and previous record perspective.
I think, what it comes down to, what we see happen in a lot of these fights is there are kind of key players on each side, right? Every team's going to have 1 or 2 players that really just carry the lobby throughout. And I think what it comes down to is Cool on the Hanzo really can pound. There are a lot of times where Homie will just carry a fight or 2 back to back. It's just neutral spam going throughout. You'll see just a quick headshot. You'll 2. They finish out the fight, waiting for the next engagement. Get another one. It's that, and then it's also nothing. Cool will die a couple times, or not hitting shots, or the rest of the team is just out of sync. And what it kind of comes down to for me is playing one hero really, really good is great. But when you don't have an option once it stops working, then you got to get scared, right?
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I think I will always say that on current patch with what changed in season 9, that I think it's a very DPS centered meta. But what I think separates, at least from my very very limited knowledge of Emerald, what separates the top 2 teams of Dallas and Ottawa from Atlanta, to be entirely honest, because of how little we've seen from War,
Valid.
is consistency, and also having tank players, and not as shade to the tank players on Atlanta or Washington or Knock, but these tank players have at least been in there making plays, which definitely helps relieve the pressure on the DPS to do everything. And if you add on to that general consistency, well, then suddenly you're not reliant on your DPS playing the RNG character all the time, and they're more able to make plays. And I think that's what's really helping them clutch out these games.
Honestly, yeah, you bring up a really good point. DPS right now is the hard meta, right? If your DPS is not getting constant picks and winning some of these fights before they begin, then your team is going to struggle to, get that momentum a lot. But I think in terms of the team around the DPS, right? If we look at some of these games, if we take a look at Atlanta specifically and why this was so close, they have a big discrepancy, right? We take a look at the roster fielded. We see Doge, their tank, Creepy, tank, and then their DPS line of Light and Cool. Cool, again, one of those people who can just win a fight before it starts or just not appear in the fight at all. But Light is their reserve player. Light is not typically, was not signed in the OG roster. And instead, they have another player, Godkiller, who, if memory serves me right, has not played a map in a fat minute.
Yeah.
And so having that not only change in kind of your roster, but also I'm pretty sure there's a big discrepancy in, rank as well. Like that's the equivalent of like me going against you, Adbon, in DPS. Like you would crap on me 9 times out of 10. Maybe I get one lucky pick, but like there's a whole separate universe between these two guys, and you're trying to field that roster. So I think Atlanta, has looked fine. Like you said, they're 3-3 right now. They're sitting kind of okay, but Washington, who we haven't really seen a whole lot of, taking this to a map 5, I honestly think that's really good for them. That speaks volumes for how much they've been able to kind of run back from their all forfeit win season so far.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird scenario, at least for Washington. Like having this really close game is a good thing because maybe they're better than what would be expected from all of their wins just being forfeits and getting rolled by I believe it was Ottawa.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Ottawa.
But actually, I want to go back and talk about the consistency again. Now that I pulled up the rosters for Ottawa and Dallas, is that on Ottawa you can see that they have a strong like DPS and tank line. And what I mean by that is they have a 270 salary player and a 250 salary tank, as well as a 260 salary support, which helps round them out. It makes them more consistent. Whereas on Dallas, as opposed to just having 2 really high ranked players or really high salary players for the league, they have 1 really high salary, which is Panda at 270, and then everyone else, except for what I'm assuming is their reserve, is 220, which is again really balanced out overall, well equaled team. There is no obvious weak point to exploit, and there is a really good player to provide the firepower that you need. And I think that's what's giving these teams advantages over everyone else. I mean, there could also be some intangibles. They may have really good synergy. Maybe someone on the team is really good shot caller. I don't know, obviously. But just looking at the raw data, they're really well-balanced teams. They have no obvious weak points. And as you said, with Atlanta having to play their reserve, that doesn't help them a whole lot. And it is this rank differential that's there. These players who are lower ranks might not be as comfortable in general playing, if they're a reserve at least. I mean, I know you said that Light has been playing more than Godkiller, but if you assume a world where he hadn't been, they're not playing as much. They're not getting as much experience playing with the team, which I just said because I'm repeating myself. Easy. But overall, I think having this more balanced roster with not having to play reserves is what's working out well for them, and I think it makes them more consistent.
Honestly, and yeah, you kind of bring up a good point. I want to obviously Dallas is not the team that played. We are waiting for a game from them. I think that's scheduled for tomorrow night, so please watch that. But a big thing about Dallas is last week we saw them have to go against New Orleans. Now, New Orleans, in my opinion, making some strides to maybe come back into the picture of playoffs, but they were down Panda, who is that 270, who is that big ticket item, and they got sent to a map 5. It was, a pretty comfortable first 2 maps, and then they got their legs kicked out, and New Orleans swept them, dragged them, and, pulled them kicking and screaming all the way to map 5. To where that's a great example of where you don't see that, veteran presence, so to speak. You don't see that Panda being in that dominant role, and it gave a team that maybe on another day that didn't have a fighting chance, it gave them a chance to almost win the series. So, for Atlanta and Washington, their rosters are hanging out. Washington, of course, doing the typical Washington thing, going like a full player under Sal, of course. But at the end of the day, it's about whether you can, take what you're given and build that synergy. And if they can, maybe they still have a shot. Because talking about Atlanta, the next game that we saw was them getting absolutely swept by New Orleans. I mean, like, dude, I don't know about you, but when I saw that game, it was close at certain points, but New Orleans is looking scary.
Yeah, it's also super weird to see now, like, end of season, New Orleans is racking up these kills. What am I saying? They're racking up these wins against like all of these other teams. I mean, obviously they lost week 1, 3-0 to Ottawa. Then they had a forfeit. Then they had another forfeit, and they've been going since then. And then a really close game against Dallas. So 2 of their losses are forfeits. They didn't play, and 2 of their losses are against the top 2 teams. Going to map 5 against an admittedly pandaless Dallas is still really good, and now 3-0ing Atlanta, who was 3-3, is really impressive considering that their previous loss to Atlanta was a forfeit loss. It wasn't an actual game loss. So it'll be interesting to see if there's some universe here where they turn this around and they end up taking Atlanta's spot in second place in the South Conference. If that ends up happening, unfortunate for Atlanta, but there's definitely a universe, I suppose. But talking about Atlanta in this game against Knock, right? This is one of those games that's a must-win for them. They
oh my
really
God,
needed
in conference, you really
yeah.
gotta have those wins on your
They
side.
really needed that win. They really needed to be 4-3 right now, as opposed to, 4-2 right now, as opposed to 3-3, because they're going into final week. This game that they have against Ottawa is a must-win to guarantee playoffs, and it's Ottawa. So, are they going to win? Probably not. It's definitely possible, but it's a must-win if they want to guarantee playoffs. If they lose this game, there's a very real possibility that Knock can make it and take their spot in playoffs. So I would imagine that, depending on how much the players truly care, they would be stressing about this, preparing. Even if they can't win against Ottawa, they want to take as many maps as possible to mitigate their map score. Because if they do lose and Knock wins all of their games, then it's over for them, because Knock will have the overall better record. Or sorry, it won't be. I don't know what I'm saying. But if they lose their game
right.
and Knock wins all of their games, Knock and Atlanta will both be 3-4, and then it comes down to map score.
And one of those things that you mentioned, like, yeah, if you're Atlanta, you're kind of sweating right now. You got to figure out how do we give ourselves the best chance. Obviously, it's beating Ottawa, and I think that is where, as far as I'm aware, it's only Ottawa and Atlanta who have this advantage, so to speak. But that's where Ricochet, the GM of the team, kind of steps up and goes, hey, listen, let's talk a little bit. Let's get ourselves together. Let's make a game plan. Let's start strategizing. And that's where the team can really rally around, come back, and be together in that, final game against, honestly, the one of the grand finals contenders, right? Like, I think we're taking a look at things, and it's got to be Ottawa, Dallas. If you want to take out one of, if not the top team, you need to start preparing now. Because if you're caught off guard, it's too late already. So having this game, like we talked about, having this game go to a loss, especially a 3-0 for Atlanta, that's worrisome. On the other side of things, having a 3-0 win for New Orleans keeps them in this picture. New Orleans, like you said, has multiple matches left that they need to clutch out. And we'll talk about this in a little bit in terms of, overall playoff picture. But this is a huge boon for them. They then, of course, have to play Dallas again. This time we assume with Panda, so maybe that will look a little bit differently. But both of these teams right now are struggling. I think Atlanta is struggling more because one thing that I briefly mentioned about last game that I don't think we've talked about for this match is, again, these players' comfortability on characters. Doge on the tank, I've seen play most tanks and be pretty alright with them. Then for the rest of the team, we've seen Hanzo Soldier, maybe a Bastion thrown in, a Kiri, and an Ana. I don't think they've swapped off other than those characters.
And Moira.
So having some very rigid flexibility like that in terms of a hero pool definitely leads itself to, worry you a little bit more, I would say.
Yeah, I would say it would. I mean, I say that, but also at least my team in Ruby, we just play the exact same thing every time, and we haven't lost a map yet. But
Valid.
there's definitely arguments to be made that if they get figured out, they're in big trouble. It's also a very unenviable position to be in for both of these teams, where both of them to secure their spots in playoffs have to win against one of the top two teams. Where I will disagree, however, with you is I think that Atlanta, personally, I think have a better shot of making it in playoffs, even though they haven't looked necessarily as good.
Mhm.
They don't need to win to get into playoffs. They just need to
Valid.
win to guarantee playoffs.
Yeah,
Whereas
that is valid.
Knock have to beat Dallas to get a chance at playoffs. So I think that Knock's going to be here. They have to work hard if they want playoffs. They have to win the next 2 games, and they want it to be, as not close as possible. Ideally, they would want 6-0 map differential for both of for these. Just adding that +6, which would, I think, just guarantee it if Atlanta loses, just based off of very quick mental maths here. I think that would just end it.
Yeah, definitely some quick 3-0s are what both teams kind of need. I think, will they get some quick 3-0s? Probably not. But looking ahead to week 7, our final week in the regular season, as long as every game gets scheduled and we don't have to delay for another week, we will see Montreal versus Washington, another very important game for the Northern Conference that will definitely have a very big impact up there. We will see Dallas versus New Orleans again, and we will see Ottawa versus Atlanta. Adbon, looking between those 3 games, which one are you most excited for?
I would say that probably just the Knock versus Dallas game is the most important here. While Knock has yet to play their week 4 game against Montreal, I think they'll probably win, just looking at how well they've been doing more recently. But this is their do or die game for playoffs. They need to win it. I think it's the most interesting game from a storyline perspective. But also, Atlanta versus Ottawa is sort of in the same boat. They're looking to seal playoffs with what would basically be a statement win over the current top team in their conference.
That'd be
And if
wild.
they can get that, if they can to manage to eke that one out, then you have a lot of questions going into playoffs about, well, is Dallas, the number 1 or number 2 team truly, or have they been figured out? Was it a one-off? Like, you have all of these different ideas about what could be going on.
I think something I will bring up, because apparently I'm getting fucking flamed for it.
was about to mention
Yeah,
it.
we're gonna pretend that didn't happen. Forgot.
Don't clip it. Don't
Which-
clip it.
Flip it. No, there was already me with the car crash comment that was clipped. We don't talk about it.
what the-
Panda apparently did play in the New Orleans match. So New Orleans, absolutely goated in my mind now. I'm so confident New Orleans comes back now because they almost took Panda down, and Panda's calling me out. So we're just going to leave that one there as we now have a beautiful transfer over into Ruby, which saw 2 games, and I use that very loosely, extremely loosely,
I don't know
because
what you're
one of the
talking
games was Philadelphia getting a forfeit win over Chicago. Andrew, would you like to chime in a bit for what happened, buddy?
Yeah, man. So the game plan here was, get everyone available.
All right.
Andrew,
time.
unmute challenge. Impossible.
Am I muted on Discord?
Yeah, you were.
Okay.
You
Well,
were.
Shane can hear me though. But yeah. The game plan obviously was get everyone available, show up on time, and then prepare for the inevitable loss that we were gonna get handed by Chicago because we were gonna get slapped, man. We were very afraid.
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
But then we got a stroke of luck, as you could say, and that they didn't have everyone show up.
Which honestly is very unfortunate for Chicago because a win. If we're gonna be real, Chicago beating y'all was gonna be a uphill battle of the century. If they managed to get it, that would have secured them into playoffs. There would have been no realistic scenario where San Diego could then come back into playoffs. But
No,
now that they
we
have to
would lose
forfeit,
San Diego, I believe.
well, okay,
But hey,
we can think.
if Chicago had beaten Philly, I think you guys just hang it up and go home at that point. Like it's
Yo,
just
facts.
Jover.
Philly just retires. Let Pitt and Halifax pull up into the playoffs, and that's it. That's GG.
No, I'm on my spot.
Well,
Alright,
you might
so-
not get it, but we'll talk about
Going
that.
into the second game, or game in air quotes.
Yeah, which was again another Week 5 game. We love the scheduling here, folks. It was Halifax versus San Diego. A team that, as of right now, looking for their first win. Who, honestly, Halifax going into it, I was very excited to watch this game because Mickey, their GM, their captain, their homeboy of the century, asked if he could swap like half of their roster over to just flex. And I was extremely excited. And then during the match, everything was the same except for map 2 when Nezuyumi swapped over to DPS, and I believe it was Boy Wonder who was then their support.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, but I think it was also for map 3 as well. I don't think it was just map 2.
Oh, no,
But
you're right.
Yeah, it was map 3 as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was.
There's definitely
Huge
some John Minky was definitely hitting he was hitting something. I'm not
He was
quite
in
sure
there.
if it was like the good stuff or if it was like the laced stuff. But it's a strategy that I guess paid off against what is, admittedly probably the weakest team in Ruby, but it ended up working out, so who
Yeah.
knows?
And I think we kind of saw the progression of that, right? Like in map 1, it was very close. It goes the distance on the first 2 points. It's 99-99. And then you get to Lighthouse and Halifax just kind of pull out this brig on a monkey and just like hang out for a little bit. And then you go to Blizzard World and it starts to become less close. And then you go to Cervasa and Halifax really figured out, hey, listen, this wild swap we made, kind of nice. It's kind of working out for us. So I'm curious to see now with these changes, can Halifax start to claw back? They currently are the Montreal of Ruby and need to play 3 games. Maybe they might not play them back to back to back like Montreal is, but they need to play 3 games. I think as of right now, only their game against Houston for week 7 is scheduled.
Yeah, and that's scheduled for tomorrow.
Oh my god, it's gonna be so good tomorrow.
Yes, it is.
But like,
multiple games tomorrow.
with that being said, do we expect any more wild swap? Like, honestly, Adbon, you and I have a very good understanding of what happened last season when we put Minky on the DPS. Man can cook. Do we expect maybe with the tank role not being as prominent, do we expect maybe one of the lower style players to flex over to it and allow Minky just an opportunity to pull out the Genji that worked pretty well last season?
I can definitely see a possible world where they do that because I remember 2 seasons ago when I first joined UR. I'm assuming at least I remember this correctly. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Boy Wonder was the backup tank for Chicago that season when I was playing. Um, where it was either me or him on tank, and it depended on whether or not I was playing tank or DPS. But I don't know if they will swap him off of DPS. He's been playing it the whole season. Even when they did these role swaps in this game, they had Nezayumi Alex on DPS as opposed to John. So it's really interesting to see if Minky will swap over. I don't think he will. Personally, I'm not worried either way. I think we will 3-0 them just like every other team we've played.
Now,
But
here's the real thing.
will
If
they
y'all
swap
drop
on
a
that?
map to them, then y'all gotta forfeit. It's like the same thing. If Philly lost to Chicago, they just leave. If y'all drop a map, y'all just gotta leave.
I'm not sure I necessarily agree with
Well,
that
hold on.
statement.
No, hold on. You gotta get the perfect season, dog. Surely
Well,
if you
yeah,
drop a map.
well, obviously the perfect season is the goal, but dropping a map doesn't mean we just leave because
No. It's
you know
absolutely.
maybe if you could have beaten us week one, it would have been a different story.
Well,
But
that's
I
it,
just
dude.
don't know what to
Everybody
tell
knows
you.
the first game's a warm-up game, dog. Everybody knows.
I
That
mean,
has been
you say
historically true.
that, but like our first game didn't appear to be a warm up game.
What are you talking about? It was for sure a warm-up game.
That appeared to be setting the stage for the rest of the season.
Which
Well,
is how
here,
warm-up
listen.
game works.
Listen, all I'm gonna say is that every season, Pittsburgh has lost week one, and so far we've won 2 out of 3 grand finals. I know we're not talking about Pitt right now, but just warm up game is coming. That's all I'm saying. But talking about the 2 teams that did play, San Diego, yeah, minor tangent aside, San Diego, kind of on the opposite. They looked really good on the first map, pretty good the second map, and then the third map really just kind of fell apart. I think what they were really proficient with is managing the chaos. A lot of these fights on Ilios felt sporadic. There were so many just tiny 1v1s happening around the map that it didn't really feel cohesive. It didn't really feel like either team had a solid plan going into it. Do you think that San Diego can take that and run with it going into their other games that they need to play, including against you guys in Houston and as well against Chicago for week 7?
It will definitely be interesting to see if they can. Obviously, I don't think they'll beat us. I think we will 3-0 them. But what's interesting about their game against Chicago is that Chicago has been improving over the course of the season.
Yes.
They played us a lot closer than the first time they played us. Not gonna lie, their game against you guys was a complete clown fiesta, and
We
I
don't
regret
talk about
watching.
it.
I regret watching that game.
We don't
Honestly,
talk about it.
Yes, I think. No, I think it was the game against Halifax. Honestly, I don't
I mean,
remember.
there was more than one game, but
Yeah, it was. but that game was a complete mess, and I don't know why I had to endure watching that. I should have just clawed my eyes out when I had the chance.
We
That
like to
game,
keep people on their toes, actually.
that I don't know. Like that game just felt like who wanted to throw more, and even though I felt like Pitt was throwing more, you guys still somehow won. Don't understand how that worked out.
It's the champ difference. You wouldn't understand.
dang,
But I've won.
Yeah, I immediately forgot about that. We're gonna ignore that.
double dang.
Last season means nothing to me except I won.
So I think Chicago have been improving. The realistic aspect of it is SDA have played how many real games? Like they played
3
Philly week one,
question
which
mark.
was like during Malga meta, I think.
Yes.
I did not
Which is like,
follow Baga.
like who cares?
They played
no,
us
it
week
was their
2.
game. It was their game against Pitt that was Malga meta.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was that was 2 straight maps of Maga, and it was
Yeah,
so
it was just
lame.
disappointment.
Yeah. Then
It
they
was so
forfeited. Then they forfeited. Corrupt moment. We won't worry about that. Then they played Halifax, which is obviously the game that just happened. I don't see a world where they win either of their games. They need to win to have a chance at playoffs. At least one of them. Their best chance is to beat Chicago.
Valid.
But I think the most likely outcome is they finish 0-7.
So then, speaking about that game against Chicago, taking a look at Week 7, it is San Diego versus Chicago. It's Philly versus Pittsburgh, and it's Houston versus Halifax. All three games, honestly, like in any other world, would be like kind of neat to watch. But in this world, all three have huge playoff implications. Obviously, not you guys in Houston. You guys are kind of like sitting pretty up at the top. But like Chicago, San Diego, massive implications. Philly, Pitt, again, massive implications. So like looking at the three games, which, obviously you playing in one of them, which one do you think is gonna be the most fun to watch?
So I think there's two ways to think about this. From like the pure chaos perspective, if we were to lose to Halifax, it would be hilarious because it would throw East Conference into to pure and utter despair. As they enter a world where if then Halifax also wins their game against Philly, and that puts Philly at 4-2, that would put Halifax at 4-2 and Pitt at currently 3-2. If Pitt were to somehow win their game against Philly as well, suddenly you have Pitt is entering third place. Well, Philly, if they were to lose their game against Pitt, would then and also lose their game against Halifax. Wait, yeah, I don't. You know what? It's so. This is how confusing it is. I don't know what's going on. I'm so confused. It's so confusing.
So there's like there's a world of ways this goes.
There's a world where Pitt and Halifax have the same record. And I think Pitt and Philly have the same record, and I think where Halifax and Philly have the same record.
Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about this. We have a whole segment on the playoffs coming up. I will say this right now. There are so many, like, possible outcomes. Obviously, Philly has looked the strongest out of all three, so some of these outcomes are more likely to happen. But just to put it into perspective, not including forfeit, if one team forfeits to another, there are 1,296 different outcomes that could happen. So there's a lot that could happen. A lot include tiebreaker matches. A lot include Halifax taking first place overall and Philly not even seeing playoffs. There's a lot that's going to happen. We will talk about that in a little bit because in order to even look at some of that stuff, I got to pull up the spreadsheet I was working on earlier with Bowser. Shout out to him. But taking a look at these Week 7 matches, honestly, like you said, there's a couple ways you can look at this. The chaos of the Halifax-Houston and the implications of it would honestly be the funniest thing. But at the same time, I think that might be one of the more entertaining. Like, out of the three, I think that might be the most entertaining to watch just to see if you guys can hold on to that perfect record.
It would. I think in a sense I can agree with that. With the most, I think the final way to look at this is which one has like the most direct
upset
playoff
kind of potential,
the most direct playoff implications and upset potential, which is actually I think Philly versus Pitt.
100%.
I don't think Philly will lose in the same way that I don't think Chicago will lose to SDA, but I think Philly losing is more likely than Chicago losing.
Yeah.
Which is, it's obviously it's relative. It's like the difference between like 0.001% versus 0.002%. But one of these I feel is more likely than the other, and it also has really weird playoff implications. Where if Philly loses to Pitt, obviously you enter this limbo where they're both 4-2. Halifax has their 2 unplayed games. Are we going to end up with a ton of teams weird interacting stuff? As we said, we'll talk about later. So there's the chaos perspective. There's the upset playoff perspective of Philly versus Pitt, and then Chicago versus SDA is literally just, I guess this is SDA's only real chance to maybe make playoffs through the West Conference.
Right. So just like the pure, like again, another implication of just like big playoff, this is your last ride. What's going on with it? Honestly, all three games hopefully should be bangers. Hopefully we can get, the other 3 missing games from Ruby scheduled at some point. I think as of right now, all of the missing Emerald games are scheduled, minus like 1, so Ruby's kind of slacking. But that is okay. We'll figure it out.
Well, all I know is that Trash Can has been in talks with someone from SDA, trying to get that figured out. I think it's going to be
Yeah.
sometime later this week, but I have no idea.
I think also, great shout out by the way. I think Trash Can was trying to message somebody and accidentally kept messaging Minky.
Yeah, that happened as well. I have her in the Discord talking about it.
Very
I was wondering what
unfortunate
that
moment.
message was too. No, I got it.
All right, so we've talked about what's coming up. Now we got to talk about a little bit power rankings. Going back to Emerald, I think there are some teams that are clearly towards the bottom, and then there are some teams clearly towards the top. We normally try to start at the bottom. So, Adbon, taking a look at this, when you're looking at these teams, who do you have at sixth place? Because I have my answer, but I am curious to hear your input.
Well, with my advanced,
With your
very
advanced
deep,
bachelor's degree of
super
Emerald.
in-depth knowledge, that PhD in United Rogue Overwatch. I've definitely have watched more than 0 games of Emerald, I swear. I would put Montreal in sixth place.
See, I unfortunately might have to agree. I currently was thinking, Montreal, Washington, it's got to be down to those two. They will play each other. So, we'll get an answer. Honestly, going through it, I think Montreal's kind of in this place right now where they're the opposite of war, right? Washington did not play for the first half of the season and are now starting to play. Montreal played a couple games at the very beginning and now have not been able to play. And so they're going to have to play 3 games back to back to back. They're going to have to play New Orleans, who's on a big upswing. They're going to have to play Dallas, who's already scary. And then they got to play Washington. So, honestly, I think as of right now, Montreal looked good earlier. I think Washington being able to take it closer to Atlanta edges that out. I think Montreal definitely is in 6th. Then I would put Washington at 5th.
I can
Yeah.
definitely see having Washington at 5th. I'm gonna shake things up here, and I'm gonna say not necessarily I would say a hot take, but
Ooh,
an interesting
lukewarm take?
Perhaps a mildly above room temperature take of
Ooh.
I'm going to put Knock above Atlanta. I think Atlanta is 4th and Knock is 3rd.
I honestly
However,
agree, though.
I don't think Knock will make playoffs. I think they will stay 3rd in their conference and end up being a better team than Atlanta, even though they're not in playoffs.
I can honestly agree with that slightly above, we nuked it for about 30 seconds in the microwave take. New Orleans right now, I would 100%, we saw it. We saw the 3-0 sweep against Atlanta. I think they honestly have a way better shot against Dallas than Atlanta does have against Ottawa. But, looking at these two teams, the past couple of weeks, Atlanta has been on a clear downstroke. They won against Washington, but it was a 3-2, and it's against Washington. It's not a win you are proud of necessarily, but it's a win that you're going to take, and you're going to say, all right, listen, we won. We need to kind of go with it and move forward. But now we have the top 2 teams, Dallas and Ottawa, obviously the top team in each of their conferences. Honestly, looking at the 2 teams, I would put Dallas above Ottawa. And I don't know if that's a hot take.
That I think it's an interesting take because you have Dallas going to 5 maps against Knock, but they also won going to to 5 maps against Ottawa. Knock have they haven't actually. Well, I'm not paying attention. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Knock played Ottawa week 1 and lost 3-0. It feels like there's a sort of a circle of it's not the circle of suck, but it's the circle of what's going on.
Right.
Is Dallas 3-2'd both of these teams, but Ottawa also 3-0'd Knock. It has not gotten that much better, or was Dallas just having an off day? I think it's definitely a world where you can put Dallas second, but I think it's very close between Ottawa and Dallas, and I will, at least with what we have seen, Dallas did beat Ottawa. I'll put Dallas in first, but not by a lot at all.
I will say though,
Right.
the New Orleans Curse did get a roster change, as I'm being informed too by Panda. So they did change up their roster from the time when they faced Ottawa, and they've also added some
Ah.
because they didn't. They only had the 5 people, I think. I don't even think they had a reserve.
Oh, that's that's definitely a part of it. If they can carry that, into their final week and win against Dallas, like take that 3-2 and to 3-2 loss and turn it into some sort of victory to help them try and make it to playoffs, then you have questions about, is Ottawa better than Dallas, or is Knox somehow with this roster change now the new top dogs? Are they, if they turn this 3-2 loss into like a 3-0 over Dallas, you start asking these questions of, are they better than Ottawa as well?
Honestly, yeah, that's a great point because if you take a look at what has happened, they get 3-0'd by New Orleans, or they get 3-0'd by Ottawa. Then they miss 2 weeks. It's a forfeit loss, and then their week 4 game was scheduled for Thursday, something I don't know, at some point. It's either Thursday or Friday. But then they come in and play that 3-2 series. They play the next week a 3-0 against Atlanta. On the New Orleans after week 1 really has put themselves back on the map. And honestly, I think kind of like what you're saying, Adbon, it starts to raise a lot of these questions. It starts to bring in what really is going on in some of these conferences. I think there's a very real shot that we could see New Orleans punch in. But as of right now, for the power rankings, we'll see Montreal at 6th. We'll see Washington at 5th. We'll see Atlanta 4th, New Orleans 3rd. We'll see Ottawa 2nd, and then Dallas 1st. And now, of course, we're going to head over to Ruby and take a look at the power rankings. And I think for 6th, it's a unanimous San Diego question mark.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
no,
Then-
nothing really could change there.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Unfortunately, at this
San
point.
Diego, they've been looking okay, but, like, against Chicago, who's probably taking that 5th spot anyway, I think they, don't take that win. Week 7, again, will be another example of one of these where just trying to scrape out that last win if you can, but I think Chicago should win that based on how their recent performances have been.
Yeah, there's a small like evil part of my soul that
Oh,
really
classic.
hopes the Chicago SDA game is a pure toilet bowl of epic proportions that like goes to like 6 maps or whatever, and somehow SDA win, because
Shit,
I think
that
it would be
great.
hilarious.
Honestly, shout out to the I think it was like season 3 Overwatch League Toilet Bowl that went to 7 maps.
Yeah, and a first to 3.
Dude, honestly, I saw that live with some of my buddies at the event. That was hysterical to watch. Gonna be real.
Yeah. So continuing though, like from the SDA to Chicago, I think 4th is Halifax, but another muted in the microwave for 30 seconds take is I would have liked to seen Halifax and Chicago play now, like at the end of the
Yes.
season after Chicago has seemed to improve, and there's that forfeit win right at the top is
The very
would Halifax
beginning.
have actually won? I mean, they did in like the scrim, but Chicago is, playing now much better than they were at the beginning. And Halifax isn't as good as people originally projected. So who would actually win that game? I still think that Halifax is better, but I think it would be a more interesting game, maybe.
Yeah, honestly, I kind of agree with you. I think having those two teams play now, like you said, it was a weird. Like the issue was just salary, right? Like talking about numbers, Chicago couldn't really field the roster the right way, so they, had to forfeit, but then ended up playing the game anyway. And Halifax still looked really comfortable against them. Now with both the roster changes on both sides, because again, Halifax now has this option of swapping some people around. Like I would like to see how these two teams stack against each other, especially because like we talked about, Chicago is kind of on this climb up. They're making a run back at it, and they're starting to look stronger every week. But then you would have Halifax, kind of just come in and probably win. So I would agree they're probably still fourth. That then leads to third, probably still being Pittsburgh. I don't, unless you have a super hot take where all of a sudden Houston is third overall. Like, I'm pretty sure it's still just going to follow Pittsburgh, Philly, then Houston. If either of Philly, Houston should be swapped, please say your piece now. But I'm pretty comfortable in saying that. Okay, that's kind of what I
But
figured.
what I will add on actually is that I think there need to be some tier breaks thrown in here. I didn't say it for Emerald because I'm not familiar enough with the overall team play and how it's been going on, but I think there's like SDA, maybe like 4 or 5 tier breaks. Chicago Pitt. Or sorry, not Chicago Pitt. Chicago Halifax Pitt together, and then another say 2 tier breaks, and then there's us in Philly.
Yeah.
I just don't see a world where it's not Philly versus Houston in grand finals. I don't think that's not going to be the outcome. Like the only team that realistically would have a shot at ruining that would be Pitt, but
Yes,
I just don't think you guys have any chance of doing that in any universe. I looked in all
did.
14 million and 605. It's not in any one of them, unfortunately.
Well, that's crazy, actually, because that's going to be the next topic. But first and foremost, we got to really talk about where we ended up. San Diego 6th. We're going to talk about Chicago at 5th. We're going to talk about Halifax at 4th, Pittsburgh at 3rd, Philly at 2nd, and, of course, Houston up at 1st. But, now it's time to, talk a little bit, right? We gotta start thinking. And those who know me, I don't do well with a lot of things, but I've been thinking. I've been in the lab with the pen and the pad, and honestly, a lot has happened. A lot will happen. Like you said, there's 14 million something or other universes, and honestly, I think we need to start talking about some playoffs, right? So, what we're going to introduce you to is Soup's Playoff Crack Pipe. This is the ultimate playoff breakdown of what is going to happen, what's going on. We got to get a huge shout out to Adbon who made this. I made a bad version, and Adbon said, "Hold up, let me make it better." And we ended with this. So
I cooked in the trenches of MS Paint for about 5 minutes. There was black on black, so I had to cut out the back image to fit the orange letters in. I think that this is perhaps a modern masterpiece.
the modern day Mona Lisa.
Comparable to the Mona Lisa, it should be hung in the Louvre. I don't like to gloat. I think I'm just a better Leonardo da Vinci. A better Van Gogh. I think I just made, this is just perfect, obviously. This is
Dude, honestly,
an amazing outcome.
Michelangelo who? Like,
Exactly,
I'm sorry.
exactly.
Like, get my boy Adbon in there. But we're going to talk about some playoffs now. I have been on the goop, in the lab with the pen and the pad. I have been all over, and here's what we've come up with, right? We're going to take a look at Emerald. And we're going to talk about 2 teams that have already locked in. It doesn't really matter what they do. They can go, the entire team, just drive off a cliff and they'd still be fine. We're going to talk about Dallas. We're going to talk about Ottawa. Obviously, those 2 teams have been dominant all season. They have both locked in the first seed in their respective conferences. So regardless of how any of these last matches go, they will see playoffs at minimum, and they will see first seed at minimum. Now, what we have to start talking about is what happens in some of these other conferences. And starting off with the North conferences, we have Washington and Montreal. We've talked about it a couple times. Washington only has forfeit wins. Montreal has 0 wins. Montreal has 3 games left to play. What Montreal need to do, the maps do not matter, because at the end of the day, if they win 3 games, they will beat out Washington's 2 map wins. So Montreal, in order to get into playoffs with this second seed, need to win out. They will have to beat New Orleans. They will have to beat Dallas. And they will have to beat the most important one, Washington. Who, honestly, Washington, they just got to see Montreal lose one time. It doesn't matter if it's to them. It doesn't matter if it's to Dallas or New Orleans. Washington sits in a way better position right now because all they got to do is hope and pray Montreal doesn't stage the biggest dark horse comeback of the century. So, like, when we look at these teams, honestly, I would probably say Washington's in a better seat right now. But a team that's in a better seat than Montreal is New Orleans as we go down to the South Conference. Again, Ottawa or Dallas, locked in, dialed in, they are set. But New Orleans have 2 games left. And in a very similar situation to Montreal, they need to win out. They need to win out both games because as of right now, their map differential way better than Atlanta's. They will have the important matches against Montreal, which I think is very winnable for them. They will have to win against Dallas. If they do not win against Dallas, then they won't be able to make it. But Atlanta, in a similar situation to Washington, need to beat Ottawa, very rough for them, or they just need New Orleans to lose one of their 2 games. So honestly, thinking about that, looking at all the math, looking at all the crazy going on, Adbon, your final 4 teams going into playoff, who do you think makes it in?
So obviously, Ottawa and Dallas are the lock-ins here.
Of course.
I think that War. Actually, you know what? Let me pull this up real quick. I wanna make sure I have this locked in into my cranium here.
He's drilling it in, folks.
I think that War will be the 3rd team that'll be making it in, and
Okay.
I'm going to go spicy here.
Ooh.
I'm gonna say Knock will win their next 2 games, and they will
Bro.
be the 4th team taking it over Atlanta. They've come in clutch
No,
more
Andrew,
recently.
I wanted to say the same thing. And I wanted to be unique, but now I'm not.
But Knock have been looking really good recently, and I think that it's very much possible for them to upset Dallas because if they just win their 2 games, and Atlanta doesn't win, Atlanta is gonna be taking 3rd place in their conference, and that'll be it. Knock will make it in. I think that this is a possible outcome. Is it more possible than just them losing one of those 2 games? No, not a chance. I think it's the most likely outcome is Knock beat Montreal and then lose to Dallas, and then there goes the season. Unfortunate, but I'm going with the spicy take here, and I'm gonna say that Knock is going to make it in as the 4th team.
I initially really wanted to say the same thing. Honestly, we saw the New Orleans-Dallas game go to 5. And granted, the first 2 maps were very much in Dallas's favor. New Orleans started really clawing back on those last, or on the middle 2 maps of Flashpoint and Escort. Push was fairly even, definitely, favored Dallas towards some of those fights. I would agree. I think New Orleans might edge it out, but just so I can have a different take, I think Atlanta, all they got to do is watch Dallas beat New Orleans. We got to sit here. We got to state the facts. Ottawa, Atlanta, probably going to be a 3-0 to Ottawa. Atlanta has not been looking as clean recently. They have been in a weird position where they are kind of winning against the teams that they should, losing against the teams that they should, but the wins aren't as clean. And then all of a sudden, the New Orleans team comes into the picture and throws everything haywire. But I honestly think Atlanta doesn't need to worry. I think whenever Dallas New Orleans gets played, they just sit and watch. And Dallas should be able to clutch it up in the end like they have already. So I think in my Emerald, it's going to be Dallas, Ottawa. It's going to be Washington. I would love to vote, and put Montreal up there, but winning 3 games back to back to back against 2 of the stronger looking teams right now, probably not happening. But we're going to see Ottawa, we're going to see Dallas, we're going to see Montreal. And I think Atlanta sneaks in because New Orleans can't win that series against Dallas. Which would then mean, if that were to come true, we would have Ottawa going against either Atlanta, New Orleans, whoever that, happens. And for us, we predict that Dallas would go against Washington, which would be a game, considering that the time they were supposed to play was week 1 and it was a forfeit. Who do you think takes that game, Adbon, against Dallas, Washington?
I think War will reach into the very depths of hell itself, pull Satan up, sell their souls to him, and Dallas will forfeit.
Valid. I was not going to say forfeit, but I can see playoffs Washington going ham. They're coming in.
Either that or War will sprinkle anthrax at the keyboards of all of the Dallas players, and they will be unable to play.
Very true. Honestly, another likely scenario. So Emerald right now looking, pretty consistent. But Ruby is all over the place, as we're going to first talk about the West. The West, Houston, you guys are locked in for your first seed. There is no universe where you guys don't drop that.
Yeah, we could literally just go all jump off of a cliff and we'd still get first seed on our conference. Easy, I guess.
Kind of free. But the Chicago-San Diego is very interesting because as of right now, San Diego has 0 wins and Chicago has 1 win. But because forfeit wins don't count for maps won, they have the same map record of 1-15. So the Houston-San Diego game literally does not matter. Houston-San Diego for week 6, you just go in, play it. If you win it, that's great. It really doesn't matter. Because what ends up mattering is who wins week 7, Chicago or San Diego. So both teams, in order to get into playoff, just need to play and win against each other in week 7. Which
this is where the chaos begins.
That is just the tip of the chaos iceberg, my boy. Because we'll say the piece on the Chicago-San Diego, and then we really get into it.
Yeah, obviously the most likely outcome is that Chicago wins, and it's just the 2 teams that you would expect from West Conference making it in. There's mild chaos if San Diego does win, which is just kind of funny in a weird turnaround where they end up making playoffs. But most likely outcome is, of course, Chicago making playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Now, again, most likely playoff or most likely scenario is Chicago getting in, and we'll see them kind of duke it out against one of the Ruby teams. But Ruby, as of right now, is a dumpster fire. It is an absolute mess. It is a dump truck driving into a nitroglycerin plant and just watching the fireworks go. Because, my boy, there are, as we, preluded to earlier, I don't think I'm saying that word right, but I don't care, 1,296 different scenarios. And again, shout out to Bowser, helped me put this all together. We have sat down, taken a look at all of the scenarios, all the possible happenings between the last 4 games. 3 of them include Halifax. And in those games, there are, first and foremost, my favorite potential outcome is there are 7 different ways that all 3 teams, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Halifax, could end with the same win record and end with the same map record. That, to me, is the funniest possibility I've ever heard. I would assume we do some workaround to figure out how that ends up getting first and second seed. But like that is just the funniest damn thing to me. Going into
Well-
what more happens. What are you talking about, Will? That's hysterical.
That's something. I'm not sure what to think about that, but it's definitely something.
Honestly, I would I doubt those are like pretty specific though, because what has to happen for all three of those is Houston beat Halifax, and then certain score lines happen, but it would be a sort of like circle and cycle of Pittsburgh has to beat Philly, Halifax has to beat both in order for each team to win at least one head-to-head, and there's certain score lines that happen and yada yada yada, but like it's just a neat thing that could happen. Will it happen? God no. There's no shot that happens. But what is most likely to happen is when you go through it, taking a look at each team's, potential outcomes, what's happening. As of right now, if we take a look at Halifax, they have a 42% chance to make it into playoffs. That is, getting on either first seed or second seed. I believe they make it a lot more if Philly is first seed. There are a lot more outcomes of Halifax beating out Pittsburgh, but there's still a 42% chance that Halifax is able to at least get into playoffs. And then there's an 11% chance, almost 12% chance, of Halifax getting first seed, which is just a wild comeback from them, considering they didn't start off the season super great. They had that forfeit win against Chicago, and then they lost to Philly, they lost to Pitt, they lost to Philly hasn't been played yet, so I'm lying. They lost to nobody. No, I'm lying still.
They've played 4 games and lost 2 of them. So yeah, they're waiting for those last 3 games.
Right, which is like, what happens against Houston, who's a tough opponent as always, Philly, who's a tough opponent as always, and Pittsburgh, who's tough, but I think they're like closest match. So Halifax still has a chance. Just for first place, probably not great. For overall getting in, not bad. But then we got to go to Pittsburgh, who Pittsburgh as of right now has a great number, a perfect number. It's a 69% chance to make it into playoffs.
Nice.
Funny number. Oh, it's great. Now, with that happens a lot more with, what happens with Halifax, because again, they have to play 3 games. So, Halifax taking a loss is great for Pittsburgh. They then just need to at least not lose one of their games in most of these scenarios. But there is, again, another world where Pittsburgh takes first place, and that is about 18%. That is, again, them beating out both Philly and Halifax, 2 in-conference teams, as this season rounds out. There are a lot of scenarios in which tiebreaker matches would have to happen. So, maybe a second place team would have to have a match, or the first place team would have to have a match. But overall, just looking at things, Pittsburgh having a very realistic shot of making it to playoffs, all just determined on how well they and myself can kind of step up to the plate. But now, we got to go talk about Philly, who, if you can do some quick math, have a great shot of getting first overall. They have a 66% chance of getting the first seed, which means they would have to go against Chicago, San Diego, whoever, wins out in there. But they have an overall 95% chance of making it into playoffs. There is a less than 5% chance that they get the 3rd seed overall, which I think would be hysterical if it happened. I wouldn't even care if I won grands. I would just love to see Philly all of a sudden just topple out. But Philly, I think, is a lock for playoffs overall. So far, it's a pretty good majority that they are in first. So in this wild assortment of percentages and what could happen, what is going to happen, what won't happen, Adbon, I will ask you the same question I asked you for Emerald. Who are your 4 teams going in to playoffs?
I'm gonna go with the really annoying safe picks of just Houston, Chicago, Philly, and Pitt. Halifax, they do have the chance. I just don't see it happening. They do have all 3 of their games. Maybe they'll be in a Montreal situation where they play 3 games back to back to back. Somehow win all 3 of them, run in here, destroy everyone. GG, easy, go next. But I think it's just the current 1 and 2 from both divisions or both conferences. That's the most likely outcome, and I think it's just the correct one.
Honestly, I kind of agree. Obviously being a Pitt, I'm slightly biased. I think we will win out. But I think honestly, taking a look at what could happen, a part of me really wants to see a Pittsburgh Halifax, run into the playoffs. I don't think that'll happen. I honestly just kind of want to see it for the chaos. However, I think this is a very similar situation, like you mentioned earlier, where Emerald is pretty much going to be Ottawa, Dallas in grand finals. Maybe New Orleans sneaks in, but it's going to be Houston, Philly in grand finals. Maybe Pittsburgh sneaks in. It's a very, very slight maybe, because 9 times out of 10, Pittsburgh would have to go against you guys at Houston in that match, giving Philly, Chicago or San Diego. But within these vast worlds, and again, this almost 1,300 different scenarios, this does not include forfeits. So if somebody forfeits, I don't really know what happens, and I really don't care, because I'm tired of doing a lot of spreadsheets and watching Bowser do spreadsheets. So taking a look, we are still at week 7. We still have this week to go out, and we still have semis and then the grand finals. But if we take a look at the Dallas-Ottawa game and then the predicted Philly-Houston game, Adbon, who do you have winning both? I think the Ruby one's a little bit easier to tell, but Emerald, Dallas, Ottawa, who do you think edges that out for the Season 4 champion?
I'm going to go with the take of saying I think Ottawa will win. I think they've played that 3-2 loss to Dallas. They've figured it out. Dallas, it could just be that they're playing worse, or it could be that Knock is just insane all of a sudden. But, having a close game against this team that is last in your conference isn't an amazing look going into playoffs. Obviously, they have, another rematch against them, and if they just 3-0 them, then I would say that Dallas has the advantage in that supposed grand final. But I'm going to say, if I can go so far as to make, complete predictions, I would say that Ottawa would win grand finals 4-2.
Ooh, 4-2. Honestly, I think I am Dallas edging it out again. I think Dallas, kind of when you bring it in, we have a lot of these players to look at, right? If you look at Ottawa, you have Laggy, who's been really good with the Genji. You have Chris, who's been a great tank for them. You have Smooth, who, on the other side of things for their DPS group, has been outstanding. But when I look at Dallas, I see Log and I see Panda, who have both won 2 championships so far. I think that is something that people don't really talk about a whole lot. Having that experience playing in a playoff match, putting yourselves, your back against the wall, getting in, maybe, they get, Ottawa gets up 2 in the series, and Dallas is going to have to figure it out. Hey, listen, we need to calm down. We need to collect ourselves. I think having almost that veteran presence of Log and Panda really will push them over the edge. And I'm going to say a 4-1 in terms of Dallas versus Ottawa.
Well, I guess we just have to agree to disagree then.
But one thing that I think we both can agree on is going to be Ruby, where it'll more than likely be Houston against Philly. And how much are we thinking? Because keep in mind, when you guys did play Philly, it was a lot closer than that 3-0 says. Let's be real.
I think we win 4-1. Even though our game against them, like Kings Row was obviously super close and Lijiang Tower was relatively close. We were completely in control on Flashpoint. Like we only gave up the first point as it's literally the worst point for the comp we were playing, and we just had advantage through everything else. I mean, we have Andrew here who also played in that game. He can give his perspective, his predictions on grand finals. I think the most likely outcome is we win 4-1.
Andrew, surely you predict the Philly upset 4-0. That was rough for me. Hold on. We don't talk about that.
The number under 1 is 0, and that's what they would be given. It would have been 4.
Listen, we get it. I'm dumb. But what are your predictions, my boy?
I just said that they would get the 0.
He's in there. He's confident. I love to see
I
it.
mean, that's definitely an interesting take considering that was the exact number of map wins you guys got against us last time.
Bro, I almost spit out my drink.
Yeah, we just played the reverse card this time.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I get it.
Adbon, we've said it before. First game's always a warm-up game, baby. And warm-up game, it's the pit motto. First game's always a warm-up game. Warm-up game never counts.
Soup, your playoff game against us is just going to be a repeat of week 1. Let's just
listen. Hold on, it's a
warm-up.
It's a warm-up game, my boy. We're gonna come in and we're going
when you have the chance to.
Impossible. I would rather die. But I'm just saying, Philly. Okay, I will say this: 4-1. I don't know. I think it'd be 4-2. I think how close that was. I think maybe a different map choice might, because if we look at Philly, right? Foliage is constantly cooking. He's constantly in the think tank. He also has Choco, who I'm assuming is also kind of like talking with him, kind of figuring out what's going to work best with, the rest of the squad. I think in finals, once you guys start having to pick maps based on losers, I think that's where we start to see a turning point. I think Houston edges it out, but I will give Philly 2 maps instead of 1.
I think it's interesting that you bring up the losers pick because only the first map during regular season wasn't losers pick. So why is it then that you would think that this would be such a big difference? I mean, first map in playoffs is either just going to be decided by the wheel, the almighty wheel, or it's going to be, I would assume, a higher seed picks. So wouldn't this be the exact same scenario then?
So then that's what my kind of thought process is, right? If you take a look, then what we're going to look at is how the first map is picked, right? You both would go into it as the first seed. You guys obviously having the way better map record. So you more likely than not would get to pick the map. So in theory, unless you guys start smoking my playoff crack pipe trademark, then you guys would pick a map that's favorable for your Doom, Torb, whatever you want to play, because you've been able to flex to so many options. Comp. That's going to favor you guys. You'll take that map. Then, Foliage and them are, on Philly, Andrew included, of course. They're going to pick a map favored towards their comp a little bit, take that map, and it's going to go back and forth a little bit until it ends up being 3-2 you guys, and you take what would be another control point, because control point is so close. So that's why I'm saying it's the 4-2, because as you go, the 5 maps in our series, right, would be control you guys. I would think a little bit of map dependency for the rest of them, but I think once it goes back to control, you guys would be able to have that advantage going in, because control by nature is just a pretty chaotic game mode where the weak teams can win and the best teams can lose. I think that's where, even if they have map advantage, you guys just come in and take that from them.
I can see it to an extent.
We'll obviously, have to see it, as we still got week 7 to play, baby. And you know what that means? That means we need to figure out what map week 7 is going to start with. So enough of my crack pipe. We're going to go to Andrew's crack pipe, which is, of course, the Wheel of Control.
Oh, yes. Now, we all know that there's only one option left, and by one option, I mean 7 options, because what we actually did is reset the entire wheel. We wanted to go back to the beginning of the season and pick at least 7 of the unique maps that we have available at our disposal.
All very
here.
unique.
So, we have, of course, the 7 different maps that we all know by name. Nepal. 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 And, of course, Nepal.
Classic.
So without a further
Absolutely
ado,
Can we play Lijiang?
no.
No!
You got to have the wheel decided first if you're gonna play.
Oh, the
Power.
almighty wheel. Okay, I will leave it in the hands of the almighty wheel.
Yes.
I swear to God, if somehow the wheel spins and I see Lijiang Tower, I will leave, though. Just
Agreed.
saying.
Andrew, you have the chance to do the funniest thing.
Please, for the, like, I kind of want it, but at the same
Well-
time, please don't.
Well, the wheel will have to have that Lijiang Tower thing happen for you, but let's see what the wheel decides, because the wheel's all knowing. And there it
I would,
goes
oh my
spinning.
God. I would love to see Lijiang Tower.
And the pick for week 7 is an upset pick. It's Nepal. What?
Oh my God, what an
That's
upset.
crazy. That is actually
No, I did not
insane.
see this pick coming. So Nepal, out of all the options, Nepal's a very unique one out of these 7 choices here.
Yeah,
it's
really-
a control map that
really
was on the
unexpected.
wheel. But
I'm shaking in
it's
my
one of the
boots right
control
now.
maps in the game. It hasn't been played yet. I'm sure it's a fan favorite, even though it's been an underdog for so long. It's really unprecedented seeing this come through.
yes, it is quite favorable for I think everyone that week 7 is going to end on Nepal and not Samoa.
Oh my god,
Or-
that
yeah.
map is terrible.
Yeah, yeah, we're running on a good note at least for the first game. Everyone else can pick their failures on the later maps.
Fair enough. But honestly, Nepal coming in clutch for the last second. Again, thank God it wasn't Samoa, and especially thank whatever deity you believe in that it wasn't freaking Antarctic Peninsula.
Oh god,
That would have been
that
terrible.
would
I'm
have been worse than Samoa.
I'm so happy I didn't have to play that map. We got a forfeit victory for that week.
I
Oh
somehow
my God.
skipped out on Ilios. Well, I got super lucky.
Oh my God, and you hate well. That's
I
so
super
annoying.
hate well.
Ugh. But that, of course, is going to be the map 1 for Week 7. Week 7's got a lot of playoff implications, as well as all of the other weeks that we have not played. So please, as always, get your matches scheduled. Get ready, because these last couple games are going to be an absolute nightmare for staff. And, boys, I think we're going to wrap it up. Any final words from the lads?
This has been a great season to see. A lot of interesting stuff happening, a lot of upsets. I cannot wait to see how playoffs go out.
Very fair.
Yeah, Overwatching. Let's go. I like Overwatch.
Woohoo, we like Overwatch. We always all like the wheel. Just saying.
The wheel and Overwatch are our 2 favorite things here, but I think
Praise
that
the
might
wheel.
will
Bowser,
do
I
it.
see you in chat. Why are you talking? What are you waffling about? Why do you think you're on the team?
We couldn't forget
I
about
love-
trash talking Bowser.
I love the fact that every season Pittsburgh, has had a team all 4 seasons of UR, and all 4 seasons there's been at least one member of the team that just absolutely despises Bowser, and it warms my heart. I truly love it, and I can't wait for the rest of the season to see all the Bowser hate. But I think that'll wrap it up for us tonight. Please schedule your matches. Please go and watch again tomorrow. We will have 2 different matches in Emerald in Montreal versus somebody, and then Houston in Ruby will take on also somebody. That's going to be it for us from Overcast. We will catch you guys next time.
I've been drinking Kool-Aid cameras like I did when I was 9. Cause I like to pretend that I haven't lost the time. In the end, the nostalgia, though it tastes fine, I can only drink a couple cause it feels like a lie. We'd play Halo and we'd lay low in our basement until the sun began to rise. We but not learn too much, cause it's hard to read when you've got tired eyes. Months go by, the time it flies, past the days that we drink Kool-Aid in the summertime. Years go by, the time it flies, past the days that we drink Kool-Aid in the summertime. I still got my friends, they've been with me for some time, and it's nice to know that they still by my side. Friends are like stars, cause no matter how far, when it's dark outside, they will be your light. We'd play Halo, and we'd lay low in our basement until the sun began to rise. We would go to school, but not learn too much, cause it's hard to read when you've got tired eyes. Months go by, the time it flies, past the days that we drink Kool-Aid in the summertime.